Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You are listening to AFR Talk, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio is Focal Point. Again, a programming note, Steve Deace will be with you tomorrow in my absence. You will enjoy him. He's going to be a perfect fit for this listening audience. Number to call if you want to join our conversation, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Now, the charges against Zimmerman, and this, and I'm not a lawyer, but this strikes me, and George Zimmerman's defense lawyer said as much, this is highly, highly irregular. And this is a sign to me of desperation on the part of the prosecution that they have thrown additional charges on the table at the last minute. Now, the defense attorney said, look, this is not fair. This isn't right. It's given us no opportunity to respond to these charges, to develop any kind of a defense against these charges. We aren't defending our client against these charges because they've never been made. The case on these charges has never been made against our client. He was on trial for second-degree murder. Well, the judge decided today that they'll have the option of convicting Zimmerman of manslaughter. They can't consider third-degree murder and child abuse. That's what they were trying to do. They were, if you can believe it, because Trayvon Martin was 17, they tried to file a charge today of child abuse. 7:30 this morning, they're out there trying to get the judge to put charges against George Zimmerman of child abuse because he was under the age of 18. To me, it's a sign of absolute sheer desperation. They know they have not made their case. They know they're going to lose, and they're trying to salvage anything they can. Now, here is the under Florida law, the second-degree murder charge is the unlawful killing which, quote, evinces a depraved mind regardless of human life. Well, that clearly is not what's going on here. This was clearly a case of self-defense. And the defense attorney, look, those are the charges that were filed, and they're saying, look, this is all that he ought to be charged with. Now, I think what the judge is doing here, I think the judge is trying to find some way to give the jury a way to convict this guy and put him behind bars. Now, so this means the judge now is actively working on behalf of the prosecution. So the judge knows that they're not going to convict him, that no jury in its right mind ought to convict him for second-degree murder. This was self-defense. So he knows that, or she knows that, but she doesn't want the race rioters coming after her. She doesn't want the race rioters tracking her down at her home. So she wants to find some way to give the jury an opportunity, an avenue where they can convict him of a lesser charge. Because remember, the jury now, they do not want these race baiters coming after them. I mean, every member of the jury is white. So they don't want the race agitators tracking them down. Trust me, there are ways to find this kind of information out. So, the concern you've got now is that this jury is going to feel this immense pressure. With a manslaughter conviction, he could go to up to 30 years in prison. And this was a charge that wasn't even registered before today. And let's clip number 3. Here is Zimmerman's defense attorney, 7:30 this morning. He is aghast at what the prosecution is trying to do. Now, the judge threw out the child abuse charge, the third-degree murder, said you can't bring that, but she's allowing the manslaughter thing, last-minute thing, allowing the manslaughter thing, I think, to give the jury some way to put this guy behind bars so they don't come and attack her house and try to burn her out of her home or something like that. So here's what Zimmerman's defense attorney said this morning.
Just when I thought this case couldn't get any more bizarre, the state is seeking third-degree murder based on child abuse. Is the court going to give this any serious contention or consideration? Because if so, we have a lot of talking to do. We can start with Mr. Manti dumped all of this on us sometime around 7:30 this morning. There was an email, oh, by the way, we've changed our lesser included request from aggravated assault to third-degree murder based on child abuse. and put 10 or 15 cases that obviously he has spent hours, if not days, if not in fact maybe more than a year plotting for this moment when he can spring it on us and the court.
So, just complaining about these last-minute shenanigans. And again, I think part of what's going on here is the judge knows that there are going to be riots if he's acquitted. So she's trying to find some way to get a guilty verdict, some way to put this guy behind bars so the entire community of Sanford, Florida doesn't go up in flames, because that's what they're anticipating. I mean, every law enforcement agency in the state of Florida is gearing up for race riots if Zimmerman is acquitted. And you know why they're gearing up for that? Because they know that that's the verdict that ought to be rendered. That's the verdict that will be rendered if justice is done, a not guilty verdict. But the judge, I don't think, wants to see that happen. I mean, she was very contentious with the defense. I mean, she even walked out of the courtroom on Tuesday night while the defense was trying to make a motion to help their client, save their client from prison. She just stalked out of the courtroom. And she's not allowed some potentially damaging evidence to come into the trial. So I think she's chosen sides. I think she's decided she wants Zimmerman behind bars basically to protect herself from any kind of retaliation. Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to John in Dallas, Texas. John, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
This is the first time hearing about this judicial act to deny Mr. Zimmerman his right to face his charges, to make a defense, his Sixth Amendment right to make a defense, and also to be aware of the charges to make a defense. And to do this after the fact is complete denial of due process. But, of course, we know Eric Holder has done well in fomenting a drug war in northern Mexico. Now he's fomenting a race war in Florida. We also have to remember that he and the SPLC are connected through the story of Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City bombing, SPLC, because SPLC was fomenting that bombing. They were involved in the group that fomented Timothy McVeigh. And, of course, that's related across to said that was struck because of Waco. Well, we know what happened in the Waco trial. The jury acquitted the people, but the judge overturned a jury verdict and imprisoned them anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's what this judge is doing today.
Mm. Well, and it seems to me, and I agree with you, John, this is just inexcusable to me for this judge to allow this lesser charge to be thrown on the table at the very last minute. I mean, that means the judge knows that justice here would mean an acquittal. She's afraid it's going to mean race riots. She's afraid it's going to mean lynch mobs coming after her. She is afraid for what's going to happen if justice is done here. And so just out of sheer intimidation, I think she is surrendering here, and she's become an agent for the prosecution. She's not working for justice now. She is working for the prosecution. All right, John, listen, I appreciate that call. Thank you for that. The reality is there was no case here, and Alan Dershowitz said, look, the prosecution just didn't make its case. That meant that the judge should have rendered a directed verdict when the prosecution rested. Defense gave her the opportunity to do it. She said, look, the prosecution has not made its case. This is a directed verdict of acquittal. Case closed. See you all later. Didn't do it, I think, purely out of fear of what would happen to her. Let's go to Jack in Ohio. Jack, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, my mind's not the topic you got, so I hope I don't upset you, but I've been wanting to call in to talk to you about ESPN's got a new topic on. It's called the body thing, and it's terrible pictures that they're showing. The basically young kids. I got two kids that love sports, and they always love going on to ESPN and looking at their favorite players and seeing who's in the Heisman race. And they 10, 12, and 8 years of age, but they enjoy it, And I know as a parent I got to monitor that. But, when I if my boys tell me, hey, I'm going to get on ESPN, I wouldn't think anything of it. But yesterday when I got on ESPN.com, they had some stuff on there that I shouldn't be looking at, much less an 8-year-old kid.
So you're talking.
I just want to encourage your listeners to call. I talk to ESPN and they can care less.
Yeah. So these are sexually suggestive pictures that ESPN has got on its website. Well,
it sure does, and it's just a shame.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate the heads up, Jack, and that's a good word for dads that have teenagers that are into sports. I mean, if there's any place it ought to be a safe place for a teenager to go, it ought to be ESPN.com. But now apparently that's even been compromised. All right, Jack, thanks for that word. Let's go to Joyce in Geronimo, Oklahoma. Joyce, welcome to Focal Point. Can we grab Joyce in Geronimo, Oklahoma? Welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'm just concerned that when the president first heard about the death of Trayvon, that he'd said that he'd wished he had a son like him.
Mm-hmm. If I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, yeah.
Right, and if he had thought about justice being blind, he certainly wasn't too worried about justice being deaf. And because the president allowed himself to say what he did, I'm thinking he is responsible to talk to the judge and clarify what could be done and what should be done according to the law, since he is a lawyer. Because I don't think it's an accident that an all-white jury was selected, and I don't think it was an accident that Mr. Wilkerson became a white person instead of a Mexican, because we had to pretend that it was white versus black.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting, Joyce. The New York Times referred to George Zimmerman early in the case as a white Hispanic. And you can go back in the archives of the New York Times all the way back to the beginning. They used that expression a total of 5 times before the George Zimmerman case. Now, it's not like they had never used it, but it had been in the attic. It had been in storage, and they hauled it out because they wanted to make this about race. The New York Times wanted to make this about race. Barack Obama wanted to make this about race. Remember, Barack Obama has consistently jumped into these racially charged cases to take the side of an individual based purely on their skin color. Remember Professor Gates, arrested looking like he was breaking into a house. He said the police acted stupidly. He had no idea whether the police had acted stupidly or not, jumped in, rendered a verdict, created a race issue where there wasn't one and shouldn't have been one. Focal Point AFR Talk back after the news.
American Family Radio, AFR Talk.
Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. That's a quote from Abraham Lincoln talking